Welcome everybody. It is sleepy time. This is one of those videos where I read from an old vintage magazine, fishing magazine, and you guys probably fall asleep to it. Maybe not, but by all means, I'm not offended. Get some Z's. So, I haven't even looked at this issue. I randomly pulled it out of the stack, and haven't even. I purposely looked away. So this is my first look at this issue's cover. Whoa, that is a big one. What we have here is the BassMaster magazine, September-October 1978 issue. There is the cover. I'm not sure of the person on that cover, but let's see. It's got Illinois tags on the boat, and that is quite a boat. Don't see them like that very often anymore. So, all right, now to the table of contents, where we shall find something to read. Private lakes, you can fish. No. I can't, no, I'm not going to read that one. Primetime Bassin. Rick Clunn's focus on fall bassin. That could be interesting. Beware, the anti-fishing movement is growing. Whoa. Little controversy to talk about. Will the real Lake Talquin please stand up? Virginia's backdoor bassin. They plan to pollute Lake Seminole? That's a weird headline. Lake Seminole. I've been fished there 2 times. The Atchafalaya, one for the books. You don't win a tournament that way. Nice guys don't always finish last. Nice guys don't always finish last. That's debatable. A guide's cure for cold fronts. The Fine Art of Spooking. The Fine Art of Spooking Bass. I know what that's going to be. It's going to be about using the Zara spook, but believe me, there's times where I swear I've mastered the fine art of actually spooking / scaring bass. Ohio Bassers discover spooning for spots. The Bassman's Guide to Freshwater Stripers. Trolling tactics for striped bass. Marina bassin, stay close and catch bass. He doesn't fish like any rookie. Veer point on bass fishing. Shorty stands tall at weigh-in. What's under the metal flake is what counts. The story of the Big O. And lastly, the female touch. So, gosh, nothing really completely jumps out at me as to what I want to read in this issue. There are some headlines that are kind of catchy. Rick Clunn's focus on fall bassins, it's either going to be that one or the beware the anti-fishing movement is growing. Let's see what the anti-fishing movement had to say back in 1978. That's as much as Rick Clunn's like one of my top 5 all-time guys that he's just one of the legends, man. So as much as that would be a fun one to read, I'm wondering what the anti-fishing movement had going on on page 43 here. So to page 43 we go. I hope it's not too long. Hope it's not one of those really long ones. Page 1, 2, and 3. 3 pages. What is all this stuff? Oh no. Oh, that's something different. Okay. Oh, this is a part 1 of a two-part series on sportsmen, the endangered species. Okay, anyways, here's the title. Beware, the anti-fishing movement is growing. By Horace Carter. Sportsmen are awakening to the fact it's time to unite. Hunting isn't the only target of the ant groups. They're at work in the schools, changing age-old values of the outdoors. It's not a fun subject, really. All right, here we go. I'm going to sit up a little more because I want to get some better light on this thing. Okay. Just as sure as God made little fishes, and lunkers too, there is a fraternity of anti-fishing enthusiasts raising its head in America and around the world with the express purpose of damning any person who stoops so low as to catch a resident of the lakes and seas, particularly if he enjoys it. Yes, there is an anti-sport fishing movement, one even more sinister than the anti-hunting threat. Okay, there's still an anti-fishing movement, anti-hunting movement today. What? Don't these people have anything better to do? Come on. I don't hunt, but by all means, that looks like a good use of time and money and energy for those people that do hunt. And same thing could be said for fishermen. Anyways, self-styled humanists brazenly say that anyone who would reap pleasure from reeling in largemouth or a sailfish from the depths of the ocean is perverted, sadistic, and sick. Well, maybe. Never mind. And only someone with a screw loose, a misplaced code of values, can derive recreation from taking the life of a fish. Well, in this case, we're not even taking the life of a fish because we're catching and releasing for the most part. But when I do take the life of a fish, and I do on occasion take the life of a fish, but not bass. Bass are my pets. But other species, walleyes, northerns, crappies, bluegills, yellow perch. Occasionally, I still release most of those, but occasionally, I will take one of those and feed it to my dad, feed it to myself, feed it to my girlfriend, feed it to my kids. You got to eat, right? We are animals of this world. We are creatures of this world. Survival of the fittest. I will be eating more fish in the years to come. In fact, I just had fish like less than an hour ago. Northern pike. Yes, they have a lot of bones. Yes, there's a way to get rid of those bones when you fillet them. That's a whole nother video. Anyways. Oh boy. All right, now, so where was I? Oh, okay. They've also fashioned a shame on you attitude for anyone who would use an earthworm or cricket for bait because they have feelings too. Well, I don't know. Crickets have feelings. Realizing that fishing and hunting is inbred in this country, and just as American as hot dogs, apple pie, and Chevrolet, yes, I drive Chevrolet, and I love apple pie and hot dogs. I eat them. Don't necessarily love them, but I eat them. Good hot dog. Good Chicago-style dog is kind of nice every once in a while. Anyways, Chevrolet. These anti-organizations now condemning sportsmen have adopted a subtle approach that will take time, but they believe will succeed. Well, thank God they haven't succeeded yet, because this came out in 1978, and we're looking at like 70 years later now. The master plan poisons the mind of the children against fishing, hunting, and the harvesting of anything that lives. Many of America's life's simple pleasures have evolved from father-son relationships along riverbanks and in fishing boats since the first pioneers hacked canoes out of giant ton timbers of the cypress forest. That father-son relationship is real. My dad took me fishing all the time as when I was a kid and a young, well, I guess I was still a kid, just in high school and that. And yeah, it's something passed on father to son in many, many cases, as it was with me. And great memories, very great memories of fish he caught and fish I caught. All right. In more recent years, husbands and wives, fathers and daughters, mothers and sons have adapted to a changing social pattern and all laughed and lived pleasantly together, catching, cooking, eating nature's bountiful supply of species after unlimited species of edible creatures from the lakes, streams, and oceans. Can these so-called environmentalists turn Americans off from fishing by labeling sportsmen sadistic and inhumane? The chapter with that answer hasn't been written yet, but they do have unlimited resources, and human nature does succumb to propaganda. Consider recent history. It was only a decade ago when the first anti-hunting rumblings began to be heard in America. Today, we're told thousands embrace the movement that guns should be outlawed and wildlife harvesting prohibited completely. Pressure is on to curtail dove hunting, a sport enjoyed by thousands that has not damaged the species' population. Much of the reaction against hunting resulted from a TV special, Guns of Autumn, that was an exaggerated depiction of wanton slaughter of wildlife by brainless hunters. More recently, another anti-hunting film, Say Goodbye, is souring some viewers on killing wildlife. This movie, shown in some South Carolina schools this spring, brought a complaint from Douglas Cole of Greenville that prompted the South Carolina Wildlife and Marine Resources Department to ask the State Department of Education to consider changing the classroom film program. Next paragraph. Cole charged that the anti-hunting movement is growing and now they are striking at my children behind my back. The 52-minute film was produced for television in 1972 by David Wolper Associates and was shown to 6th grade students in the Greenville Public Schools where Cole's daughters attended. Cole said his daughter was being brainwashed by a gory film of wildlife bloodletting in an oceanography class. Hunting is bloody. Hunting is raw. Hunting is real. That is, we evolved from hunters and gatherers. It's very real. It's inbred. It's ingrained into us. It's part of who we are as a species. But I do agree that, there are those bloodlusting hunters that shoot at anything that moves, even though they may not be licensed to do so. That, I do not like that. That does not go well with me. But by all means, hunting is in our blood. It is who we arose from. And there's no shame to be a hunter at all. Ken Stanzel, a specialist in non-game and endangered species at the South Carolina Wildlife Department, called the Say Goodbye film a sort of gory Walt Disney movie. He said its theme is men are bad, animals are good. Yeah, there's that Walt Disney thing. Never mind. It's an entirely anti-game management film saying outright that nothing can be done to save wildlife and that it's too late. Jim Mills, director of hunter safety for the Wildlife Department, said, "Half the film shows senseless bloodletting. Oddly enough, none of those anti-hunting films have taken note that conservation and study of wildlife in many areas of the country have resulted in a greater abundance of turkey, wild boar, deer, and other game that in any period of recent compared to any other period in recent history. Instead of disappearing populations in some areas are such that more hunting pressure is desirable to preserve the adequate food for the wildlife. With the anti-hunting crusade gaining momentum, organizations with the humanistic attitude have taken up the cudgel against sport fishermen or anyone who derives pleasure from catching a fish." This is in bold now. "It makes no difference that the angler is putting meat on his family's table. These objectors to fishing hang an albatross of shame around the neck of every man, woman, or child who admits to being thrilled from feeling the tug of a fish on the end of a line." That is a thrill, feeling the tug of a fish on the end of a line. The feeling that bite, whether it's a topwater blow up or a bass sucking a football head off the bottom of the lake. There's a bit of a rush, no doubt. But what's wrong with it? Nothing. Among the foremost advocates of the movement against sportsmen is an organization known as KIND, K-I-N-D, that stands for Kindness in Nature's Defense. The administration of the Kindness Club is now under the Humane Society of the United States, headquartered at 2100 L Street, Northwest, room 200, Washington, D.C., 20037. Okay, he obviously wants you to write letters to this address. Again, that is, what is that? Is that an L or an I? 2100 it's 2100 L Street, Northwest, room 200, Washington, D.C., zip code 20037. KIND has attacked fishing through 3 clubs of varying age groups. The Kindness Club is ages 6 to 10. Defenders make up clubs from 11 to 14, and the Ecolo Kind is the group of teenagers from 15 to 18. Literature is made available to local organizations through the Humane Society that will sell its brochures and pamphlets to clubs or individuals, offering a 20% discount on volume orders. By the way, this kind organization, I have never heard of them, so apparently they must have disappeared. Prior to the time the Humane Society of the U.S. undertook the administration of the KIND program, which it does now operate, leaflets were distributed against fishing from a Waterford, Virginia address. One of the most offensive of these pamphlets to fishermen was distributed among school children and was designed to foster an abhorrence to fishing. Entitled "You and the Fish," this leaflet was prepared by Hope Sawyer Boyukamaye, aimed at the very young. This leaflet said, I certainly butchered that person's name, Hope Sawyer Boyukamaye. "A fish is a little animal that you accept that, like you." This doesn't even, I can't even read this. "A fish is a little animal like you, except that to him, water is like air to us. Of course, a fish has feelings too. Modern scientists stress this fact. A fish likes to live. He likes to jump and play, just as we do when we feel happy." How many fish have you seen jumping and playing? Zero. Obviously, fish jump because... Why do bass jump when they hook your bait? It's because they feel like they have something like a bluegill lodged in their throat. So that's why they jump when you hook one. because they jump and they try to shake that, dislodge what they think's a bluegill or crawfish or something stuck in their mouth. They're not jumping because they like to play and have fun. Oh my gosh. All right, when a fish is caught on a cruel hook, he tries desperately to get away. He is fishing for his life. Is it sporting for a big human being to laugh and call that fun? When they've begun to think, what? When they've begun to think, many grown-ups who used to fish have given it up now. Instead of killing, they find fun in studying fish. If you know people who just won't give up fishing, even when you tell them it's not right to kill anything just for fun, ask them to at least use artificial flies instead of living worms who have feelings also. Thank goodness fishermen are not killing fish just for fun. Back in the 1978, maybe there was people out there killing just for fun, but even back then, people were killing to put food on their table. Fishermen were not killing to just have fun and just wantonly waste the food, waste the fillets. No, that makes no sense. And nowadays, with catch and release such a huge part of fishing now, it's fun to catch them and then release them, and they go off on their merry way. So, no harm, no foul, no harm. R. Dale Hilton, director of the Kind Youth Division, replying to a query from this writer about the distribution of this anti-fishing leaflet, said, "While we reprinted all the extant leaflets for the program at the time, this particular leaflet has been out of print for a number of years. It has been replaced by the leaflet Care of Cold-Blooded Pets. In fairness to the present Kind organization, this more sophisticated and professional-looking brochure does not directly criticize fishing. It is a 6-page, 2-color leaflet that advises how to provide care, treat illness, and maintain a clean habitat for cold-blooded creatures that are captive in aquariums. It advises owners of such pets as turtles, goldfish, frogs, toads, salamanders, and caimans on proper care to maintain healthy, cold-blooded pets." Okay, nothing wrong with that. If you got a pet, you want it to be healthy. Whether the new literature is a retreat from the hardline anti-fishing position taken by the You and the Fish leaflet is not determined. The new piece on cold-blooded creature care even indirectly refutes some of the dogma of the first one. It speaks of feeding turtles chopped raw meat or raw fish. Someone would have to kill a creature to get this food. It advises feeding chameleons and other lizards, flies, grasshoppers, roaches, and other insects, as well as worms. The original leaflet prodded children not to use live worms in fishing because they have feelings too. In general, some other literature made available by Kind is not offensive to fishermen and conservationists today. Leaflets entitled Caring for Your Dog and You and the Birds, among others, is simple humanitarian advice to young people that every sportsman would endorse. Unfortunately, there is no reason to believe that Kind won't revert to the more direct assault on fishermen once it has wormed its way into the classrooms of America and built a membership with clout. Memberships are available to youth for $3 a year, and adult teacher memberships are the same, $3. Group memberships are $1.50. Yet, there is no doubt that Kind, Jesus, this is a long one, is an anti-fishing organization. The slogan on its letterhead has that subtle inference. It says, I promise to be kind to animals and people and to speak and act in defense of all helpless living creatures. Hey, I'm a proponent of conservation. I'm a proponent in protecting wildlife, but I'm also a proponent of hunting and fishing. Ardale Hilton, in his letter, stated, the Humane Society of the U.S. adheres to specific policies as stated by our governing board. God, I'm just having a hard time reading tonight. Sorry, really sorry. Are you guys sleeping yet? Ardale Hilton, in his letter, stated, the Humane Society of the U.S. adheres to specific policies as stated by our governing board of directors on the recommendations of a special program and policy committee of the board and as approved by the voting membership. Quite naturally, our policy in opposition to sport and trophy hunting is opposed vigorously by trophy hunters. Again, he does not directly voice opposition to fishing. The Humane Society of the U.S. was founded in 1954 for the purpose of opposing and seeking to prevent any use of animals that causes fear, stress, or suffering. The Kindness Club, which we now administer within the United States, was founded by Mrs. Hugh John Fleming in 1959 for the promotion of the human ethic, particularly among young people, as best described by Dr. Albert Schweitzer as reverence for life, Hilton continued. He notes in his letter that orders for materials are received from teachers and schools as well as from other individuals. Often our materials are distributed to schools by local humane organizations who have ordered them for this purpose and to enhance special programs they offer to classrooms. This sneaky way of infiltrating anti-hunting and fishing literature into the public school system draws fire from the 60 million license-buying sportsmen in America. They are unified in the belief that the minds of their youngsters should not be poisoned against a recreation as old as the country itself and at taxpayers' expense when teachers have a captive audience of their children. There is no doubt that should the kind propaganda continue to consume classroom time with teacher supervision and encouragement, class action lawsuits will be filed by riled parents in many states. It's kind of some scary stuff he's writing about. I mean, like, it's a whole conspiracy to turn the children against fishing and hunting. And apparently this kind thing didn't really work because, I mean, obviously it's maybe, I mean, this club, this acronym kind, I've never heard. Obviously we got modern day acronyms, but I don't know, they probably don't have nothing to do with this one, or this one might be defunct. Just how many kind organizations are scattered over the country has not been publicized, and heads of state departments of education contacted and questioned about this anti-fishing movement contend they are not aware of any such activities in their school systems. But with the Humane Society of the United States now administrating the program, there are increasing reports of anti-hunting and fishing propaganda in schools from Chicago to Florida. Congressman Don Fuqua of the 2nd Florida District asked the Library of Congress for information about organizations opposing to sport fishing in his state, where millions of tourist dollars are spent by fishermen and hunters from all over the nation. They sent him the following. KIND is an organization established by the Humane Society of the United States for young people ages 6 to 18. Any local Humane Society chapter could form a KIND chapter. There is one KIND club in Florida, and it is run by the Osceola County Humane Society, Inc., P.O. Box 1005, Kissimmee, Florida, zip code 32741. The congressman passed along the information that the regional office of the Humane Society was located at 3165 McCroy Place, Orlando, Florida, 32803. FG Jerry Banks, Director of Division of Fisheries, Florida Game and Fish Freshwater Fish Commission, says, anti-fishing, is absurd. I guess a renewable resource is not to be utilized by sport fishermen or commercial fishermen. The anti-fishing enthusiasts should not order fish in restaurants and would probably condemn the largemouth bass for feeding on forage fishes. A concerned Auburn University biologist and wildlife researcher voiced his belief in a letter saying, the ultimate goal of the Humane Society is to develop, largely through education and the exposure of unnecessary cruelties involved in much of the public hunting as conducted today, a generation of adults who will no longer have any wish, desire, or willingness to kill any living creature purely for pleasure and recreation. Humane groups are seeking and are successfully collecting donations to bring these goals to reality. They are directing anti-hunting and presumably anti-fishing next programs toward people of all ages and walks of life. They are gaining public support of the adult population through newspaper advertisements, television, public service messages, and public meetings. Through legal actions, the humane groups are attacking state and federal conservation agencies and their key personnel. Friends of Animals, Inc. has stated that sport hunting is neither sport nor hunting. This organization believes that wildlife belongs to all people and that destroyers of that life must in turn be destroyed, preferably by due legal process. They are determined to stop hunting, and they feel the end result justifies the means. This is apparent in recent events. Funds for Animals brought court actions against the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that could have eliminated September dove hunting this fall and forever. In another suit, a civil action filed March 13, 1978 by the Committee for Humane Legislation, Inc. and Friends of Animals, Inc. attempted to cut off Pittman Robertson matching funds from the federal government to state wildlife agencies, claiming that these aid programs threaten the survival of non-game species. Since its passage in 1937, the Pittman-Robertson Act, which levies an 11% federal excise tax on sporting arms and ammunition, has generated large sums of money for a wide range of wildlife restoration projects. Sportsmen have voluntarily contributed what now amounts to over $60 million a year. They have been proud of this effort. Why would anyone be against such a program? The funds have been vital to game species and other wildlife as well. Yet, the suit initiated by the two anti-hunting groups sought to stymie the federal aid to wildlife restoration program, which through its history has been the cornerstone in wildlife conservation in this country. In their complaint, they charged that the PR program adversely affects their organizational activities by limiting them and their members' ability to protect non-game animals and to obtain and provide information on non-game species. The complaint further stated, much of the federally financed activity under Pittman-Robertson consists of burning and clearing hunting of forests, burning and clearing my God, what is my problem? Oh shoot, now I lost my place. Okay, adversely affects their organization activities by limiting them and their members' ability to protect. Oh, I jumped to, okay, let me start at the top of this paragraph. Yet, the suit initiated by the two anti-hunting groups sought to stymie the federal aid in wildlife restoration program, which through its history has been the cornerstone in wildlife conservation in this country. In their complaints, they charged that the PR program adversely affects their organizational activities by limiting them and their members' ability to protect non-game animals and to obtain and provide information on non-game species. The complaint further stated, much of the federally financed activity under Pittman Robertson consists of burning and clear cutting of forests and the flooding of marshes in order to propagate more game animals. They charged such activities destroy the habitat of the vast majority of species of animals, birds, and reptiles, which are of no interest to hunters and are consequently classified as non-game. I don't think they do that anymore. I think wildlife management knows that diversity of habitat is what is healthy for all wildlife, game and non-game. But I don't know that for sure. But it just seems like a diversity of habitat is kind of the goal, right? The complaint filed in federal court called for a halt to all federal funding of state wildlife projects until adequate environmental impact statements had been filed. The protectionist organizations claimed that failure to submit such statements was a breach of the Environmental Protection Act, and so further distribution of PR funds was unlawful. The challenge was serious. However, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was prepared. Work toward the overall statement had been going on since 1969 when the Environmental Protection Act was passed. It was agreed the service would publish a draft environmental impact statement and hold at least one public hearing. They had planned to do both anyway. This agreement, plus two others relative to making a computer listing of all projects and a central location in Washington, D.C., where current projects could be publicly examined, caused the plaintiffs to agree to postpone their case. U.S. District Court Judge Charles R. Reiki dismissed the suit after the agreement. So, for the moment, it appears the assault on the federal aid and wildlife restoration program has been repelled, yet it was costly. It cost man-hours and money defending a long-proven, worthwhile program. This would have been better invested in wildlife conservation activities. Yes, it would have been. Like many other states, South Carolina's wildlife authorities pitched in to help the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service prepare its defense. According to the South Carolina Wildlife's John Evans, Chief of Information, the department used 15 man-days. Multiply the time our agency spent on the case, said Evans, by 50 for the 50 states. This was time that could well have been spent on more productive wildlife conservation pursuits. It's certainly tragic that so-called wildlife protective groups who claim so much about caring for our animal friends are seeing to it that our wildlife is getting less and less. Can we expect a similar attack on state agencies to stop the use of Dingell-Johnson funds in fish management and restoration programs? What if the anti-groups had been successful in their suit to stop the Pittman-Robertson matching funds apportioned to the states? In Alabama, this would dramatically affect some and eliminate most of the wildlife management areas and the funds to support people who run these areas and programs, said a state biologist and wildlife researcher. It could be a harbinger for future action by sportsmen, users of wildlife and fish structures, resources. Users of wildlife and fish resources may well lose their outdoor recreational opportunities if such anti-groups are not met by a united front of hunters, fishermen, houndsmen, trappers, bow hunters, bird watchers, conservancy members, and others who are concerned about the well-being of wildlife throughout the nation. The time has come for all who enjoy the outdoors to actively oppose those who would eliminate the right of any group to engage in the recreational purpose, said the Alabama biologist. Hello? Pause. Okay. All right, we got two more, just the rest of this page, okay? I'm exhausted. How about you? Are you getting a little sleepy-eyed? All right, I hope so. This is really kind of some serious stuff, but it's kind of dry reading, really reading about what's going on. I mean, it's very serious, but dry. And certainly reading this isn't going to help me catch any more fish, or you, but it is a slice of Americana from 1978 as far as what the antis were doing at that time. Okay. Loss of the outdoor opportunities by any one group results in a reduction in the number of people who will become involved in the perpetuation of wildlife for consumptive and non-consumptive uses. We need to work together under the guidance of our state and federal conservation agencies to oppose those who would eliminate all hunting, fishing, and consumptive use of wildlife so that all outdoorsmen can continue to enjoy these recreational activities for many generations. We need united support of all user groups who care about the future of wildlife, the Alabama wildlife researcher said. The humane and anti-groups have shown little concern when deer are starving from overpopulation, when raccoons are dying of distemper and rabies, or when fish are dying from pollution or stunted from crowding and lack of food. Only those who have a vested interest in the future use of the resource will care enough to help preserve it. Federal funds for sport fish and wildlife restoration and hunter safety education comes from the excise taxes on outdoor sporting goods. In 1978, over $87 million in such taxes has been collected, according to the U.S. Department of Interior figures. Appropriations are made twice each year as tax receipts arrive at the Treasury Department. The second appropriation for fiscal year 1978 totaled $49 million. These funds, all designed to maintain healthy fish and wildlife populations for this and future generations, is allocated to the states. My home state of North Carolina, for example, received a total of $1,688,303 from this federal tax levy in fiscal 1978. Of that total, $1,043,000 is marked for wildlife restoration, $381,000 is for fish restoration, and $264,000 is for hunter safety programs. Distribution of these funds to states is based on land and water areas and the number of licensed fishermen and hunters, except for the safety program that is divided on the basis of relative populations of the states. It is unjust that sport hunting and fishing are being condemned by individuals and groups across the United States today. Until roughly 50 years ago, the land was cursed by market hunters, then an honorable way of making a living by uncontrolled harvesting of a God-given crop. Only when hunters and fishermen became sportsmen did wildlife management emerge. Now those who have fought for hunting and fishing controls so a wholesome recreation. I have a hard time reading this writer for some reason. I don't know what it is. Now, those who have fought for hunting and fishing controls so a wholesome recreation could be enjoyed for generations are the brunt of critics who want to abolish every form of wildlife harvest. In North Carolina, there was once a pretty colored bird, the Carolina parakeet, that had feathers desired by makers of women's apparel. The demand was such that market hunters destroyed the species in just a few years. There were other hunters in the business to make a living who sold deer and waterfowl in wholesale quantities. There was nothing dishonorable or illegal about it. They were harvesting a marketable product, but greed was their downfall. Hunting was unregulated. They gave no thought to perpetuating the species. that obviously has changed. Some were such enthusiastic businessmen hunters that they employed others to help. In the Currituck Sound area, an early record shows that a man named Edgar Burroughs, who lived in the edge of Virginia, employed 20 expert marksmen to hunt waterfowl in 1856. His associates used 23 kegs of black powder from early fall through December that year. The slaughter of waterfowl in that era was such that huge side wheel steamboats transported the ducks and geese to the northern markets. 2 men in a single day, Russell and Van Buren Griggs, killed 892 ducks. There were at least 100 blinds with decoy sets in Currituck Sound at one time, and many breeds of ducks were being taken for market at profitable prices. The canvasback was selling at prices from 50 cents to $1.25 each. A half century ago, it became evident that uncontrolled market hunting was extinguishing some wildlife species and threatened others. Laws were passed by legislatures to protect wildlife and game fish. It was the sport hunter and fishermen who pushed federal and state governments into regulating and strictly controlling the harvest. It also marked the beginning of license fees that had revenues earmarked for restocking and renewing wildlife populations. And it's so true. Thank goodness we have limits on, on what we can shoot, what we can catch. Those limits do protect these resources. I can't imagine what would happen to some of our lakes if there was unlimited take of fish. It would just, fishing would be no fun, because if you happen to go to a lake that had unlimited fishing, the fish would be fished out. It'd be tough to catch much of anything. Anyways, since the emergence of the sport hunter and sport fisherman that ended the market hunting, fewer species of wildlife have come closer to being extinct. Indeed, careful management has brought many species back in numbers that are greater than even imagined. Today, those who pioneered modern game and fish management and who saved countless species are being condemned by a cult of humanists intent upon poisoning the minds of children against the harvesting of any fish or animal wildlife. Had not the sportsmen appeared to save the American creatures of nature, there would be none. Thanks to them, there is bountiful supply in all the areas where human habitation hasn't pushed them out of their habitats. Hunters and fishermen still reap a profitable harvest, but the effort plowed back into the resource keeps it growing. The sportsmen deserve a better fate than critical scrutiny and slander by the bleeding hearts who have done nothing to maintain a healthy, growing wildlife population. Recently, viewers of WXYZ TV in Detroit were shocked at a statement by Jacques Cousteau, whose underwater world exploring and TV programs have captivated nature lovers. Cousteau even stunned interviewer Jerry Chiappetta. If one enjoys the act of catching fish, sport fishing, then he is suffering a perversion, said Cousteau. In further statements, he clearly outlined his philosophy that catching fish for fun or sport is evidence that the angler is suffering perversion. In part 2 of the series on sportsmen, the endangered species, BassMaster writer Horace Carter examines this humanist movement that's spreading the poison that it's evil to catch fish for recreation. In the November-December 1978 issue of BassMaster magazine, Carter warns that these anti-groups have crept into positions of influence in policy-making government study commissions that would speed up their drive to outlaw fishing and hunting. Okay, well, how do I mean, that's paints a pretty ugly picture back in 1978, but in a lot of ways, the hunting sportsmen, the fishing sportsmen we have evolved, and the thought of conserving, um, being conscious of what we're taking and what we're not taking is greatly increased since 1978. The catch and release ethic in fishing is so much more widespread now than 1978, and it matters, and it's helps our fisheries. I mean, a lot of these heavily fished reservoirs. How often do we catch a fish that has been captured before? We know it. We know it's been captured by the healing of a past hook puncture in their mouth. We see that. We know that. It's real. The catching and release is real. It works. Fishermen are not perverted. That is whatever. That's just wild. And I guess to end this, we'll just show you this advertisement from 1978. There it is.